Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. Tonight I have the pleasure to have once again a good friend of mine, Dr. Peter Brimble from the Asian Development Bank office in Cambodia. Peter, welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes. You know, Peter, it's such a pleasure to have you. And I was saying to many of my friends to say that, look, whenever I want to have a good discussion on the larger perspective, macroeconomic perspective of Cambodia, I can only think of two people, Dr. Brimble and Dr. Faisal Ahmed, from the representative of IMF. So that's why I'm annoying you for, I don't know how many times you've been here already, but it's such a pleasure to have you back. And I understand that today we're going to talk quite a bit about the Cambodian global sort of like economic perspective, right? But for those who never seen your show before, perhaps you can sort of like introduce yourself a bit.
Sure. Well, my name is Peter Brimble, and I've been working in Cambodia now with the ADB for almost 3 years as the senior country economist.
Cambodia? In
Cambodia. Senior country economist and deputy country director. Before that, I worked as a consultant around the region, including for you, on the garment sector.
Yeah, the garment, yes.
So, I mean, in a way, I've really had the good fortune to come back to Cambodia and to have a chance over the last 3 years to really get into a lot of interesting areas, and it's been a very, very satisfying experience. And
yes.
I think sharing ideas with yourself is always part of the picture.
Yes. Well, I think we are sharing idea between us, but more to the country who are keen to hear from a third party, you know, a perspective on our economic, you know, situation in our country. But tell me, I know that the reason I ask you is mainly because I know you're involved in drafting a section, the Cambodia chapter in the ADO, which is the Asian Development Outlook, right? So tell me more about that, and then we can start from there.
Right. Well, basically, every year the ADB puts together a compilation of economic analyses of all the member countries of ADB, about 45 countries in Asia.
Member states.
And at the Cambodia Resident Mission, we're responsible for outlining our position on Cambodia's performance,
yes.
In this case in 2012, and the prospects for 2013 and 2014.
Okay. So it's sort of like a 3-year, you know.
That's
okay.
right.
Basically, what does the ADO hope to accomplish? It's an annual publication, right?
Well, it's an annual publication. It's a chance for each of the country economic teams to put together their views in a consistent structure, so that anybody wanting to learn about Asia, it really is a tremendously...
It's
easy to compare country. It's easy to look at the overall picture and how Cambodia fits into Southeast Asia, fits into Asia, fits into the world.
Yes.
It provides a lot of perspectives in that regard, and it's a very, for us, it's a very valuable product to situate Cambodia in its, you know, in the region and in the world once a year.
And it is the ADB Cambodia team who prepared that.
Yes.
But you prepare in consultation with the other, no?
Well, I mean, we work closely with headquarters because they provide us with what we call the baseline data, what's going to happen in America, what's going to happen in Japan, what's happening in Europe. And so there's a consistent set of macro assumptions, and then we look in the Cambodia story and come up with our position on Cambodia in that regional picture. Speaking
of the Cambodia story, now you want to set the stage a bit. Where are we in 2012?
Yeah, well, basically we analyzed the growth performance of Cambodia in 2012. At the beginning of the year, it looked as if there would be some clouds on the horizon, actually. The performance of Europe, the performance of America, demand for Cambodia's garment sector, and so on. But as the year worked on, actually the situation wasn't as bad as we thought. Tourism jumped up a lot. The construction industry started to boom. Because of tourists from around here.
I see.
Asian tourists coming into Cambodia, much more than before.
Yes.
I think the total tourism total number of tourism arrivals increased by about 25% in 2012.
It's about what, 3 point some million tourist arrivals.
It's similar to garments actually,
yes.
similar to garment exports. So our final assessment of broad growth in 2012 was 7.2%.
Okay.
And you know, it had increased from the beginning when we were expecting the garment industry to do particularly badly, but it didn't do that badly in the end.
I think the garment industry is primarily because the Everything But Arm initiative that we're exporting to Europe, right?
That's
so
correct.
Basically, there is a decline. There was a decline toward our main primary market, which is the U.S., right? But we're saved by the increase.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, that Everything But Arms access helped, and also, you know, going back to the work we ever did together, right?
Yes.
I remain quite upbeat about Cambodia's garment industry.
Okay.
Many people feel that it's low value added sector, but in fact, maybe as we can discuss in a while, I think there are changes in trends there that make it look very useful.
I want to clarify this because when you talk about garment industry, you know, in Cambodia people always tend to lump the garment and the footwear. I mean, you know, but here when you're quoting the statistic there, are you combining them or purely garment?
We would normally combine them all together, but the footwear part of it has been growing more quickly than the garment part of it, and it's also higher value added part of it.
Okay. Speaking about high value, don't you think that now Cambodia have to actually move to something more high value? Because let's face it, you know, wage is going up, right? Wage in Cambodia is going up, and what do you see in that?
Well, I would say, I mean, one statement that I like to say is that Cambodia is now out of the T-shirt business.
Yes, for sure.
That you know, you look at the new investments in the garment sector, they are much higher value-added products: sweaters, underwear, swimsuits, dress shirts. So I think, and the new industries, the new garment investments that are coming in, you just have to look at the factories. All the way down from the airport to Sihanoukville, and you're seeing really much higher end investments coming in, and I think it's clear that you know, Cambodia is not at the lower end, as when we did our work 7 or 8 years ago. You're seeing a shift of that sector, and I think it's, and the shift into footwear is a part of that, because previously footwear was a little bit more complex, a little bit more technically sophisticated. Not so easy, but now it's coming in more. And
what other sector you think matter here last year in the growth?
Well, I think garments and footwear is clearly important. I think tourism is obviously still an important sector, but it is beginning to diversify away from just temple tourism to beach tourism or nature tourism, that kind of thing. It's beginning. Ecotourism. You're beginning to see that trend, although it's still largely, you know, temple tourism, but that trend is happening, and also more tourists from other countries like in Asia coming in place of the European or the Americans, which is a trend which is happening.
So these are the growth sector, right? Any other thing that you think matter quite a bit in 2012?
What we saw in 2012 was a massive inflow of foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment increased from about 800 million in 2011
to
about 1.5 billion in 2012.
Almost double.
Well, 70% increase.
70% increase.
So what are these? What kind of investments are we seeing? We're seeing investments in automotive parts. We're seeing investment in electronic products.
Primarily from where? For these two components there? For these
mainly Japanese investment.
I see.
Stepping out from Thailand.
Because the flood?
No, this
not
happened.
Necessary, yeah?
This trend was taking place before the floods occurred. The floods may have provided
precipitate a bit.
A sort of one other factor, but actually I think they're looking to spread risk. They're looking to take advantage of the
GMS Southern Growth Corridor, isn't it?
That's right. The GMS Southern Economic Corridor is beginning to stick, and you're beginning to see that logistics and that value chain playing a role in the spreading of the risk of these Japanese companies. But not only Japanese. I mean, Hong Kong-based group, some Taiwanese-based companies are also investing in electronics here.
Okay, okay. Speaking of the Southern Economic Growth Corridor, Japan is currently building the bridge over the Leung. These are part of that Southern Growth Corridor, right?
That's the remaining missing link.
That's a
if you
missing
like,
link,
that bridge. And if you go to the bridge now, it's coming there.
It's coming up, yes, exactly.
You can see the bases coming out of the river. So
yes.
They told me the other day, maybe in about a year or so, that bridge will be completed.
So when the bridge will be completed, you would say that the hard infrastructure is complete. Now the trick is, as you know, for competitiveness, you need to tackle also the soft infrastructure, right, which is the trade fire station. Any major progress we did last year?
I think people became much more aware of the issue. And by the way, don't forget you have maintenance of hard infrastructure.
Okay. Yes.
And actually, by the time of the completion of the bridge, I think the road will be complete from Poi Pet down to Babet. But the maintenance of the road still needs to be carried out, and maybe the expansion of the road needs to be carried out. So, bearing that in mind, I think on the logistics and the trade facilitation part of the picture, I think there were moves last year to open up the border with Thailand and allow trucks and buses to come across. I think there were moves by the Customs Department to try to remove some of the unofficial payments along the corridor. Yes. But there probably need to be much more efforts on that. And I think you're right. The logistics and that are going to become very important for the new investors in Cambodia.
Let me shift forward, since the Asian Development Outlook, right? Annual Outlook.
The Asian Development Outlook.
Yes. It's covered also the projection for 2013 and 14. What do you see the main trend the next 2 years?
Well, I think in Cambodia, we really remain pretty bullish, right, on the economy. We see that in 2013, this year, despite still sluggish trends in Europe, especially in Europe.
Isn't it recovering a bit now?
Not in Europe. I think in Europe you're still seeing a slowdown, and with issues in Spain and in some of southern European countries, I think it's... But we see growth being constant at about 7.2%. But looking forward to 2014, we see a big recovery in the States.
Yes.
Japan, actually, recovering. We would, at the moment, project a growth of 7.5% for 2014. So that's a kind of getting back up towards the 8% growth path that Cambodia experienced from 1992 to 2011. Remember, 8% average per year, 8 to 8.1% average per year for 20 years. So, looking forward, we hope that this is a stepping off point. And the important thing to note is that stepping off point is still quite good, even though energy prices are so high in Cambodia.
Speaking of energy, any major prospect in terms of major infrastructure for energy, hydro? What
we
do you
see there are 2 hydro projects already coming online, Kam Chai and another one in, I think, Kampot province. There are about 4 or 5 additional ones coming online. So hopefully in the next couple of years you will see the impact of that on electricity prices.
Yes, I definitely want in the second part of our discussion, series on Cambodia prospect, economic prospect. I want to touch a bit on this issue of public-private sector partnership, because I think to resolve the larger issue like infrastructure, we have to go toward the public-private sector partnership. But that's a topic for the second part of our show here. What are the area that you see as challenging for Cambodia to maintain that 8.2 or 8% annual growth?
Well, I think
rate,
we mentioned energy is a key one.
Scale.
Looking forward, right now skills are already becoming a constraint. The rapid inflows of foreign direct investment are basically challenging the skill levels of the workforce as it stands. but that's to be expected. I mean, nobody could have predicted that growth in foreign direct investment last year. It's not something you can plan, and so government can't really plan, but government can be responsive, and so.
Didn't the Asian Development Bank have a major loan program with the government on the TVET?
Yes, we are now, the first stage of that project was focused on building regional TVET centers. And as we plan for the second phase, we plan to make the second phase will include an element of public-private partnerships in a view of really trying to identify what the private sector needs, how the vocational training system can respond better to that, and to promote partnerships between the public and private sectors to meet those needs.
So do you see currently a mismatch of the need of the FDI, you know, in terms of like the few sectors that you have mentioned earlier, for example, car assembly, electronics, you know, and then the level of skill qualification that the Cambodian labor force has. Is there a mismatch? And if there is a mismatch, is that something that in the medium or short term the Cambodian government can actually, you know, tackle that?
Well, I think I might not use the word mismatch, and it's automotive parts, not automotive assembly. It's producing wiring harnesses, that kind of thing. I would see that it's hardly surprising that when you have a sudden influx of a new sector, that the skill set isn't there. Remember that the garment sector has already trained up a labor force of 400,000 or 500,000 in working in a modern, you know, kind of environment, which is a base
industrial discipline,
which is a very important base, and we shouldn't. I think, of course, companies are always going to say they need more skills and stuff like that. But there is a need to fine-tune a little bit the vocational training curriculum and so on, and also information process, the labor market information.
Yeah, I think the soft skill is very important in the sense that, you know, learning how to assemble a thing is one thing, but moving from an agricultural mindset where you work with the weather, you work with the sun, or you go home with the sunset, as compared to industrial setting where with very fixed and regimented schedule, it's quite interesting.
I mean, if you imagine Cambodia without the garment industry as a main driver of industry from mid-90s onwards, right? I think that's very critical, and you know, I look at the way in which the depth of the garment industry is developing. It hasn't quite developed the backward linkages yet, but you're seeing much more potential for that in the new
So are you saying that in a way the garment industry is a sort of like a training ground, you know, for further reshifting toward other more skilled labor?
And I think as the companies become more outward looking, like the Spanish investor that we know about, who are looking to subcontract out to a small factory in Battambang, in a basically a place for disabled people to live. I mean, that kind of networking, it will come.
How, Peter? How do we, you know, make sure that this linkage take place? Because it's important to have FDI coming in, but if they are just clustered among themselves and the ripple effect is not felt to the local, you know, SME, and that's where linkage matter here. You know, you see that linkage developing.
Well, I mean, it takes two to tango. It takes a foreign investor who has a slightly longer-term vision to think about where they might find local suppliers, and it takes the local supplier to reach out, to be effective and efficient. And I think it's the kind of two-pronged approach to try and bring those two together, and use some arguments and some, I use the word moral suasion, but you know, for a foreign investor coming here and the factory manager working here for 2 or 3 years, it's very difficult for him to make the decision to go out to find a subcontractor, because if anything goes wrong, then he's in trouble, right?
Exactly.
If things go right, then it actually goes right down the road. It doesn't go on his watch. So you have to somehow target the owner more and try and bring the owner on board as a player. And I remember we talked about that before. You have to go out and talk to the owners in Hong Kong or in China or in Taiwan, wherever, to bring them on board. And I think that's quite important.
So any other thing that you see is very important, trend for this year, next year?
I think in this year, next year, the inflationary pressure looks as if it's going to be pretty stable and relatively low, 3.5% inflation. But overall in the region, things are bubbling along a bit. Domestic demand is really driving growth in other countries in the region as well as in Cambodia. And so we feel the need to keep an eye on that, just to make sure that inflationary pressure doesn't build up, especially when you have construction industry here growing a lot. You have credit. Domestic credit is increasing at about 35% a year, which is very high.
Although I think it's a bit risky, no?
Yes.
That because some bank would because they see this as a very bullish market, so they take more risks, they lend more.
This is the main warning
with less
of the
prudential.
IMF. Yeah, the IMF is identifying this as their key.
I see.
So we too would look at that and say that it's a little bit too fast.
Okay.
So maybe a little bit on the inflationary pressures. The other thing
how about on monetary and fiscal? Bear in mind we're a dollarized economy.
Well, there is not much monetary. I think on the fiscal side, the government appears to be making good progress in raising tax revenues.
Yeah.
Looks like going up to 14 or even 15% of GDP in the next year or so, which is quite good compared to what it was before. In fact, at the end of the day, it all comes down to whether there's some international shock.
Yes.
If there's an international shock, and you can talk to Faisal about that, like a global financial crisis or something happening in Europe, the Eurozone implodes, then though that's risky for the country, because everything comes in very quickly, a very open economy, a dollarized economy. So
from the revenue collection, you see, because in a few years' time we'll be a member of the ASEAN Economic Community, lower tariff revenue.
I think we're already there. I would say Cambodia on the tariff side of the game is moving pretty much towards the direction of
because I think we start to implement already the ATIGA, the agreement, ASEAN Trading Good Agreement, where we lower many of the tariff. And on the other side, on the excise and tax, you see a very good increase already in domestic tax revenue.
Yeah.
So all in all, what's your take?
Well, I say I think we're pretty
in
bullish.
that report. What was your conclusion?
I think the conclusion was that the economy looks pretty strong. We need to build up a little bit more. We call it fiscal space, but we need to build up a little bit more the ability to keep funds available to be resilient.
Yes.
Moving on the diversification front. In the Asian Development Outlook itself, we were asked to identify a key challenge.
Okay.
And in the event, we saw that the economy was looking quite positive. We have all those other issues. We decided to focus on a challenge which is dealing with child malnutrition. So that was another issue that we thought.
Why child malnutrition? How do you see fit? I know child malnutrition is all part and parcel of this Millennium Development Goal. That the Cambodian government is supposed to be meeting that. But why particularly child malnutrition? What's the effect? What's the impact?
Well,
where does it fit in the whole thing?
We try to look to see what is a compelling development challenge for Cambodia, and I guess the 2010 health survey, demographic and health survey had come out, and it showed that stunting, child stunting, remains at about 40%.
Stunting, what is stunting?
Stunting is essentially a measure of malnutrition. It's that the child's physique is smaller than a normal child.
Yes.
An average child from somewhere else. Doesn't look that much, actually. You might not notice it if you see it. But it reflects the lack of nutrition into the child from conception, from the
like you said,
prenatal,
the first 1,000 days.
Yeah, the first 1,000 days. And when we came to think about this, actually, I was thinking about 2030 and the government's Vision 2030 and why 2030.
Yes.
Right? And I just started looking at why 2030 and the issue of the life cycle approach to skills development. And if you see, there's a graphic, a very nice graphic that says, okay, if you're thinking up here about economic growth, productivity and stuff, where does it start?
Okay.
And you go back down and you say, well, basically it starts here. It starts at the time you're conceived, prenatal health of the child inside the womb, and after that. That's actually quite important. If that doesn't work, and you don't get satisfactory nutrition, then that's going to affect all the way up
ultimately,
here. The UN estimates that Cambodia loses about $150 million a year as a result of nutrition.
Explain me that. Is that an opportunity cost that you're talking about here?
It's that the workforce is less productive. Not being able to be as productive. It means that actually, as a stunted child, you normally enter school later. You leave school earlier. You're generally not healthy during your life, so you probably have some sickness. And you're not as productive in the labor force because your cognitive development. So when I came to look at this,
this is powerful.
This seemed to me a compelling story about a challenge that Cambodia faces that has a humanitarian aspect, but also has a very strong economic aspect. And we found a number of, there's a thing called the Copenhagen Consensus, which is a group of very, very high-powered economists who sit every year and decide what are the compelling issues in the world. And child malnutrition is generally number one in terms of, and the returns to fix that, both from a humanitarian point of view and from a economic point of view, I think are quite high. So we just thought, this is not a new issue. I mean, people have been aware of this issue for a long time in Cambodia as well. But I think first the health survey shows that it's been stagnating. Many things have been improving here. Maternal mortality, child mortality, they've been getting much, much better. But that one stayed the same. Second, the irreversible effect of it just gets you in your heart. I mean, as you may know, I have a young baby now, or 18-month-old boy. This really makes me think about that. And thirdly, I think it's, while being a well-known issue, it's quite clear that nutrition and related investments have not had priority in the government's planning documents.
All right. So Peter, we're coming to the end of the first part of it. So maybe I will wrap it up for that week, and then next week we'll continue on public-private sector partnership. I want to give you a few minutes for your message. What do you want the audience to remember from our 30-minute discussion here?
Right. Well, I feel, to tell you the truth, I think our analysis for the Asian Development Outlook leads to a bullish conclusion that Cambodia's economic performance looks relatively strong for the next few years. But there remain a number of issues, and the social issue of malnutrition among children seems to us to be a very compelling argument that we need to address that as a middle-income country, or as a approaching middle-income country. We need to really address this issue as part of an overall development strategy.
Good. Thank you, Peter. Well, ladies and gentlemen, from this first part of the series, I feel that we have a good sort of like a macro bird's eye view of the past, which is last year, the performance last year, 2012, but where we did well in what sector and what caused this good performance. But we also have a glimpse, also the challenge of Cambodia to maintain its sustained growth around 7 to 8%. Because let's face it, for the last 20 years, Cambodia on average have fared quite well by maintaining an average of 8%, which is very, very, praiseworthy for a country that is emerging, from a post-crisis, country like that. So I'm going to close for this week, but then next week we will continue on by focusing on something that I think is very important for the next 5 years. Sort of like cycle of the new government. As you know, we have a general election coming up, and the new government will, when formed, will have to start looking at its next 5-year economic plan. And I thought that one top item on the agenda that I think the government will be looking is pretty much on foreign direct investment. And in there are FDI that require more than just the money of the private sector. It does require the commitment and support of the government, and that's why I think it'd be a good topic for us to tackle next week on public-private sector partnership. So on that note, good night.